Hey friends, thanks for joining me this week on the Leading Healthy Creative Teams podcast. This week I want to talk about trends. Trends is something that I see the church jump into a little bit more than I think is wise. And I want to unpack what that looks like, and there's no better time to do that than this week. Last week, Meta, through Instagram, which they own, released Threads. Threads is a social media platform that is text-driven. It is very similar to Twitter in a lot of ways. And so if I were to pick a competitor, who is Threads competing with? It would definitely be Twitter. The idea is that you're sharing text messages or text-based messages, and then people will respond in the context of a thread. So it's a very nice, organized way to communicate with one another socially. Personally, I don't like Twitter, and I don't mean the company, I mean using Twitter. I'm not terribly drawn to Threads either, and I want to share that because I know there are some people that love this mechanic and mechanism or methodology of communication with one another. I am not one of those people by a long shot, but I don't want that to color the way that I'm approaching this conversation around trends. Because the format of a trend doesn't matter. Here's what this looks like played out. This is why I don't think that churches should trace trends. It's very expensive with our time. In order for us to communicate effectively, to be effective in our creative pursuits, we have to be proactive. We can't be reactive. Trends force us into a position of reactivity. I think about the news. An event happens. Everyone scrambles to go to the place, to get the information, to call the right people, and to get the information that they need to communicate to a larger group of people, to broadcast it. That's not our job in the church. We already know the message that we're proclaiming. We already know the message that we're preaching. We already know the pathways to grow in our spiritual walk. We know about discipleship. We know about evangelism. We know about worship. We know about gathering together as the church. The mechanisms of our faith don't change. And yet, when a new platform like Threads comes out, we drop everything and think this is the thing that we need in order to be successful. Now, I'm not talking about general curiosity. I'm not saying there's no value in exploring and beginning to understand. Absolutely, yes. But the joke that I keep seeing surface, and I kind of participated a little bit myself with one of the YouTube videos I put out last week, all of these gurus are saying, here's how you master Threads in 24 hours or something. And I'm thinking to myself, this platform hasn't even been out 24 hours. And you're already telling us that you're the platform expert here. This is the problem. The problem is Threads is nothing like what it's going to be like. And what I mean by that is the initial iteration of anything is always designed for optimal engagement. It's not designed for monetization by the company yet. You need to get a critical mass of users before monetization starts to make sense. You want people to feel like they should be a part of this platform. Right now, Threads is fantastic because there's no advertising. Have you been on Facebook lately? Have you been on Instagram lately? My intentional followed content versus suggested or advertising content is absurd. I'm probably getting 30 to 40% of my feed as content that I wanted. The 60% on my feed is stuff that Facebook says you'll like this or somebody paid to show it to you. It's a miserable experience from the perspective of I want to see the content from the people that I've followed. So of course Threads is going to feel like an amazing place right now because it's untouched by monetization. But we're going to get there. The reason I bring that up is because all of the strategies that we're looking at right now are based on this utopian environment that's not real or not long lasting. This isn't what Threads is going to be. And the reason that matters for you as a church is because this moment isn't helpful for you. There's nothing about being the first to market for a church that's actually impactful. It doesn't matter if your church is the first church on Threads or not. Now, if you already have an account and you're seeing interaction with your people, I mean, great, explore it. But my concern is that a lot of churches and really a lot of communications leaders or creative leaders who are already busy, by the way, I hear a lot of complaints or laments, I don't have enough time to get my job done. Then stop picking these things up. That's my charge to you. Let somebody else figure out what it looks like to pioneer in this space because we don't even know what it is yet. Twitter never really caught on successfully for the vast majority of churches. I jumped onto Twitter very early on. I pushed really hard to figure out how to be successful on it, and it just didn't resonate with the congregation that I was serving in my role. Maybe you're a Twitter crazy church and everybody's pumped about Threads. I don't know your context like you do, so hear that. But I do know that Twitter just wasn't a successful platform for a lot of churches. It still isn't. That doesn't mean that individuals aren't successful. It doesn't mean that if you love Twitter, that it's bad for you to love Twitter. No, love Twitter. I don't care. I won't interact with you there because I don't love Twitter. The same is true of Threads, though. It's a very similar mechanism for communication, and it just doesn't resonate with everybody, and that's okay. But if you pull away from your normal day-to-day operations, and when I say that, I mean the implementation of your communication strategy, the pursuit of your creative endeavors as a creative contributor to your church, if you pull away from those to invest in something completely unknown, there's a good chance that you are gambling your time on something that may never pay off, and you're making it harder for yourself to operate the plan that you've already put in place. A lot of my perspective is built on what I believe to be the wise way for us to run our creative endeavors. We need to build a plan, and then we need to operate the plan. And we need to be disciplined in the way that we operate the plan. So create a plan in terms of how you're going to communicate, who you're going to communicate to, what platforms you're going to leverage, and operate within that structure for 90 days. That's my recommendation. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. You don't need to be reinventing yourself every 2 weeks. Run your plan for a period of time and evaluate it. Keep track of analytics. Test. How is this going? Is this working? Is this moving in a good direction or not? Really timely example. I'm going to be making some significant changes to the way that I create content, both podcast and video. It's going to change. And the reason it's going to change is because I'm looking at my analytics, and I've run this strategy for a prolonged period of time. The podcast is coming up on 1 year of being published every single week. Haven't missed a week of publishing a podcast. And you know what I'm finding? My downloads are not a reflection of the amount of time and energy that I've put into the podcast. And that's okay. I have no problems with that, other than it doesn't make sense for me to maintain this work for these results. If nothing's changing, nothing's changing. I need to be very honest in evaluating the success of the content that I'm putting out there. And I recognize that it's been successful and helpful for some, and I'm thrilled that it has been. And I'm not talking about stopping creating content altogether. I just need to change something. So when it comes to a trend like Threads, maybe you feel like our current communication strategy isn't working. Great. Understand why it's not working, and then make an intelligent decision as to why you're going to make the change. Don't just make the change because Threads exists and it's new and it's interesting. That is the single worst way to make a decision. If you're making your decisions on what to invest in based on what appears in front of you, based on the new trend, you're actually not going to have a very helpful baseline to evaluate its success or failure. So Threads right now, what is a measure of success for me? Is it the number of followers? Well, all they're doing is auto-following you to the people that are already connected to you on Instagram. So you're not necessarily growing in your follower count, you're duplicating it at best. So if you're duplicating your followers on a new platform that's connected to an old platform, which is like, do you see the logic here? Do you see how this isn't really an honest number? Let's say that we create another Facebook account for you, and all of the people who followed the first one now follow the second one. Have you doubled your followers? Of course you haven't. You've actually just maintain the same number. And in some cases, there's probably atrophy. Sure, there is the potential for you to communicate differently on this platform, and that's fantastic. But is that a current pressing need for your organization? Do you genuinely feel like your current communication strategy needed this one thing in order for it to be successful? I doubt it. I haven't heard anybody who's having conversations about Thread talk about it in that way. No one has said, fantastic. This was the gaping hole in our communication strategy. This will help us communicate more effectively. People will stop asking us when the next event is because of this tool. No, of course not. No one has said that. Instead, people have said, here's a new platform. We should use it. We should figure it out because we should. The church should be here. The church shouldn't be here unless there's an intentional strategy or plan for why you are using that communication channel. The reason I really want to lean into this is because I'm watching two conversations happen simultaneously. The first, why are creatives burning out in the church? Why don't I have more time as a creative leader in my church? I'm hearing these conversations time and time again. And then I'm watching the same group of people say, we need to drop everything and figure out how to be on this platform that we don't have any plans for. We don't understand. It's brand new. The biggest irony to me is that when we respond to trends this way, we're actually creating the problem of not having enough time. So let me encourage you to do this. I want to encourage you to have discipline in the way that you operate your plan. If you don't already have a plan, can I encourage you to watch this video? I'm going to put a link to it on YouTube in the description, and I'm going to put it in the show notes for the podcast. I really want you to consider building this simple plan. It'll take you about 5 minutes. I'm serious. It's that simple of a plan. The reality is that you don't need an over-engineered and complicated plan in order to have discipline in the way you communicate. The video walks through the process of building the plan. It tells you the things you need to consider, and then stick to the plan for 90 days. Once that 90-day period is up, now have the conversation. What is Threads? Does it fit with what our congregation needs? Is this a win for our church? If you build a plan, even a simple plan, and operate it for 90 days and are disciplined about it, I guarantee you the margin in your work is going to go up. Margin is the key to long-term health, to avoiding burnout, and to lasting in ministry. And that's what I want. I want you to last in the context of ministry that you're in. You've already spent time building trust. You've already spent time caring for and communicating to the congregation that you serve. Let's make the most of what you've already invested and keep you in a healthy spot so that you can continue to minister well.